Morning, everybody. I'm super excited to welcome Alina Vandenberghe. Alina, welcome.
Lucky me.
I know we've been going back and forth a little bit through LinkedIn. I've seen you speak at amazing events. You're an incredible leader. Love your product. So we'll get into all of those. But before we get going, for our audience who may not have met you, I'd love to have you take a minute and introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm the technical co-founder of a company called 𝗬𝗨𝗏, and I might not look like a typical tech co-founder because I also have 4 kids, and I also talk in public about very difficult topics that generally are not to be talked about. The reason why I do that is because I come from an unusual background. I come from Romania, where I grew up through communism, and during communism, it was not okay to talk about difficult topics in public because we would have the secret police and bugging our house and everything. And I've made it my mission to be an enabler of difficult topics out in the public. That's the brand that has been preceding me as well.
Awesome. We will get into a lot of difficult and challenging and interesting topics. But before we get going, maybe you can talk a little bit about formation of 𝗤𝗨𝗏, how you came about doing that. I know you gave up a pretty cushy job. And so I'd love to have you walk our audience through that.
Yes. So 𝗤𝗨𝗏 is my first company, my first baby company. I started it because I was an employee in many different industries. I worked in finance and in media and education, and I climbed the corporate ladder relatively fast. I think it was about 6 years from intern to SVP. So I obviously did it well in very complex structures, publicly traded companies and so forth. Yet I found myself to be a very unhappy employee. Even though I was paid very well, I wanted to create something from scratch that would make me happy to work in. So that's how I decided to start it with my husband, which I know it's also very unusual. So my husband is my co-founder. And the mission was, how can we create a company in which we are happy? It's a fun equation.
So did you have a product in mind when you started?
No, we did not have a product in mind, which is, I know every founder says you have to start with the idea, you have to start with the vision. In our case, the vision was, how can we create a company in which we can work and we're happy and we leave behind? And we had some theories, and I knew what my strengths were. I know what my husband's strengths are. So for instance, my husband is really good at sales and my strength is product. That's what I've been doing in these organizations. And we knew that we've both done sales before, and we wanted to help revenue teams in succeeding. And we started going to events, and we found the problem at events in person in San Francisco and in New York.
And so, how did you narrow those things down? I'm sure you must have come up with 40 different areas that you could have started. Why did you pick the specific angle you took?
And initially, my husband had this idea that was, again, it was very early on, 2016, where he observed that the salespeople were not putting anything in their CRM, and he wanted to do that automatically with all sorts of AI and tools at that time. As we were putting the data in the CRM, we found other things. For instance, one company in San Francisco, they were wanting to have their sales team book meetings for their onboarding specialists. They were it's called 5Square. It was at that time a competitor to Toast and this restaurant tech. And they wanted to book the onboarding for their onboarding specialists, and they wanted to have a round robin to it and a smooth handoff. We custom built it for them. Then we realized that there were many other people that wanted to do this kind of booking and round robin and routing. And that's how we came up with all sorts of ideas. Eventually, what we felt extremely passionate about, and what I feel extremely passionate about these days, is how to optimize your top of the funnel, especially around marketing with agents, and how agents can be deployed on your website and on any kind of top of the funnel channels to optimize for conversion and move your accounts through closed one. But we discovered that through a lot of embedding ourselves through revenue teams and seeing what is really problematic for them.
So when you started, when I think about it 10 years ago, the booking tools were coming alive. 𝗤𝗨𝗏𝗏, Calendly, and a few other things came about. But the market was broad because Outlook and other tools didn't allow you to do that. So when you started, did you worry about competition, or who did you focus on? When you said, this is what we're going to do, we're going to make it for many companies, not just one custom product. What was your process? How did you go through that?
We found at least 20 people in our space that were thought leaders that had this particular problem. It seems very narrow, but we found 20 strong voices that other people would follow that said, if you improve this to me, I can improve 50% of my conversion rates, which would yield to double my pipelining essentially for all my inbound flow if you just solve this for me. So it was just like so obvious to me that if you get 20 thought leaders who agree that this is something, a problem to solve for them, then the market, the rest of the market is going to follow. So that's like it's snowball. And right now I use the same kind of theory where I just follow the people that are thought leaders in our space that other people admire, especially when it comes to marketers and ops people. And I just embed myself with them and understand what I can be most of service to them to be able to aid in their growth and add some fire on that growth. And that's how our product roadmap gets shaped.
And what's your definition of a thought leader, Alina?
Okay. Yeah. So when I look at the way we did it at the beginning is when I would go to events, I would see where people would gravitate towards, who were getting most hugs, who were getting most traffic around them. And I knew that there was admiration. I would not look so much at the follower count because the follower count is a good indication that they might be followed by others and they would be thought leaders in a space, but it's not the only indicator. What matters to me the most is admiration for people from peers in their field. That tells me that they're doing things that people want to replicate.
And then what would you do? Let's say you said 20 thought leaders, but let's say if you found 4 and 5 of them, like how do you engage with them? What would you show them? What would you ask? What's your process?
It's very simple, paper, pen. I would say, hey, I'm thinking about this. This is how I'm looking at solving for this particular problem. What do you think? And because they would get involved in kind of shaping my thoughts and my ideas, then they would take a lot more ownership of it. So it would be a lot easier when I would say, hey, I actually have it ready. Do you want to have a look? And then we would jump on a call. I would show them some mock-ups. They would make it better. I would go build it. Then I would show, hey, I've built it. Do you want to try it? They would go, and it was like what you call now these days design partner. But it was just me with pen and paper as a product manager kind of finding the solution at that time.
I know you have written a lot about pricing, so I want to dwell on that because it'll matter on the next part of our discussion where the future is going related to pricing. So walk us through a little bit as you prototyping, talking to thought leaders, figuring out what the solution is. Of course, your customer base is growing. Walk us through those moments we had to deal with pricing to figure out what the true value was, what you're trying to solve, and how you did that.
In our case, at the beginning, it was really tough because we were doing one part of our process was booking of meetings, and we were being compared with Calendly, even though it was just one part of the handoff and one part of the booking flow. We would still get compared with Calendly, and that I don't remember. I think at that time was like $10, and it was at least $10 I can try to hack it. So why would I pay for you more? So that's how we came up by that time with $30. So it was just a matter of reference. And it's a matter of how people see what they can do versus what you can provide and like the internal cost, etc. I say that overall, if I was more convicted at that time in my capacity as an entrepreneur, which I wasn't because it was like my first time starting a company, I would have priced a lot higher because they paid like $3,000 or $6,000 for my software at that time, and I would give them $1 million in pipeline afterwards. So the ROI was massive. So I was for sure underpricing, but I was not a confident entrepreneur when I started.
But your adoption started though at a sort of a freemium level, right? You will have individual users come in, use it for themselves, and then it will sell up. What was your acquisition model?
No, I've never had bottom-up model. It was always top-down. It was the sales leader or the ops leader or the marketer leader deciding, well, I don't want to have leakage in my funnel. I'm going to bring 𝗔𝗵𝗴, and they would drive then the adoption and the training with our help or with our CS team. But it takes someone who has the commitment and the understanding that they want to change things and they want to improve conversion internally. So we would have to have a very strong champion because it's not just let's use it for scheduling. It's a changing process.
So did you put a sort of a classic front end, top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom level, and a structure from digital to people? How did you put a structure together if you're going after the CRO for conversion?
We sold actually at that time. So when we started, we sold to the head of biz dev. Then we started selling to growth, VP growth or director of growth, then to demand gen. We never had like the CRO specifically. It's mostly like VP. It does happen in some cases that the CRO would get involved, but more rare. Now I would say it used to be a lot simpler. It was like 3 people in the buying group or something like that. Now it's become a lot more complex because people are a lot more concerned about buying software since they can vibe code things, and a lot of organizations are being restructured, and a lot of people are being let go in this larger organization that we serve. So there's a lot more uncertainty, and as a result, the buying group has gotten larger.
So before we get into buying, let's step back into sort of reaching out to them, creating awareness, top of the funnel. In your mind, what was it then, and what do you think it needs to be now?
We kept the fundamentals the same, and the same fundamentals are working. Even though the channels might be adjusting, emails getting saturated, call is getting saturated, the direct mail might be getting saturated, I believe that the fundamentals are always the same, in that if you have a very strong brand that has high trust associated to it, then you're a lot more likely to break through the noise because you already have multiple touches on the top of the funnel. So we create in many ways. And if you have that trust, then the sales process becomes a lot easier. You need at least 18 touches for awareness before you send an SDR to see if they're ready to take a meeting. But the fundamentals of building trust are essentially the same. Yeah.
Which are? Can you break that down a little bit for us?
So for someone to believe that indeed you can solve the problem that you are saying that you can solve for, they have to have proof, and the proof can't come from me, because I can say great things about 𝗔𝗵𝗴 until I'm blue in the face. It doesn't really matter. It has to come from a peer, and that's what we do a lot. We make sure that the customers that are coming through 𝗔𝗵𝗴 have everything that they need to succeed, and that's a fundamental, and that's how we get our customers to talk on our behalf when we need to, and promote them and put them in front and center.
So does your sort of funnel, intake funnel, look the same or different today than it did 10 years ago, roughly structure-wise, composition-wise, people-wise?
There's a lot of adjustments. I think that we make adjustments to it like every 2 months or so, but it's minor adjustments. For instance, our account scoring has adjusted quite a bit. So what we do in our scoring and our modeling is we look at the accounts that are sticking, that are not churning, and the composition of that, and we look at 3,000 attributes, and making sure that those that have high in our low churn are the ones that we score high at top of the funnel as well. And that's a process that's ongoing. And that helps us a lot to keep the CAC low, because every quarter we have different accounts that are being pushed out of the funnel. And because we have less accounts, we don't spray and pray. We know that these are accounts that are going to do really well with 𝗔𝗵𝗴. We know that we can really help them. So we're all convicted that if they become customers, they're going to be aided. So as a result, we have a lot more energy for them. So that's a process that's ongoing. And then for the channels, overall, they're shifting like percentages here and there, but the channels are similar. One of them is, for instance, partnerships. For us, partnerships is big, with companies that are trusted in the space, and we'll always look at who are the people that we want to get and partner with. It's both service providers and people that we integrate with. Another big part, of course, is brand. I currently touch about 50% of the pipeline with my LinkedIn posts, which is extremely scary. And of course, we do the same as everybody else: SEO, content, newsletters, webinars, events. Yeah.
So, Alina, sort of coming back to the journey over the sort of the past decade, your solutions has grown from a point solution to a full suite of, right? And then the great thing is that you can serve a customer at multiple touch points, and therefore it becomes stickier. But also on the other side, as solutions become complex, you have more audiences in an organization that you're trying to meet, and therefore noise rises and the expectation of success rises, right? It's a little bit of a double-edged sword. So can you walk us through, as you brought in more and more tools and capability, especially with your emphasis on workflows, has it made it easier for your CS team to work with the customer because they have many things to do, or is it more challenge? Walk us through that journey, because we deal with that every day, because we have a full suite of products, which is great conceptually, but it's also very difficult at times because you're having varied stakeholders in an organization with very different needs.
I would say that it depends a lot on the organization and how they look at their pipeline efficiency and how they look at their tools and their ops structure. There are companies that are very well oiled and they have centralized teams that handle with all the tools and the processes. And then I have companies that are a lot more fragmented, and different teams are even duplicating things between themselves within the organization. We work much easier when they have a good process centralized to and for efficiency. And that's why we partner a lot with RevOps agencies that are helping and aiding on giving them good structure. For the companies that are duplicating even within their own organization things, it's more difficult. And our CS team and our AMs have to do a lot of investigation and learn who's doing what with what tool and trying to get them together. Our team is trying to do alignment. Did you know that this team is also doing this and they've already bought a similar tool, and getting them to talk to each other. But yeah, it's highly dependent on the type of companies that we work with.
You mentioned about partnership, and just now you mentioned about RevOps. Can you tell us a little bit about your go-to-market? How, if you can share what percent of your revenues touch, or roughly at a priority basis, how does the partner ecosystem look like? Who do you work with? How do you recruit? Because that's another game on its own, right? Selling direct is one, and then bringing a partner into the fold. Can you walk us through that?
I love
Just a little
partnerships.
bit.
I love partnerships because it makes you feel a lot less alone when the go-to-market for events, for content, for social media. It's a lot more pleasant when you feel like you're part of a tribe and the community. And some of these partners have become really good friends, and we're sharing our grievances together. So I really like that. It's about 40%. I would say it's about 40% of our pipeline right now that's coming from partners. And we have different tiers, we have different processes and how we work with them and how we go to market. But we have both marketing activities, go to market activities. We do a lot of enablement of each other to keep ourselves in the loop and making sure that we can win.
And can you tell us a little bit about the program structure? Are they mostly affiliate, or are there SIs, mini SIs deploying alongside with HubSpot and Salesforce? Like, what's their nature?
I would say that because we touch so many parts of the process and we integrate with so many tools, we have so many types of integration, and every partner is a bit unique. So for instance, I can give you some examples that are public. One of them is Gong. Gong is a reseller for Chili Piper. They have many of our booking and our handoff embedded in their product. And we're very grateful for that partnership because they are very focused on the sales process and the CRO and enabling the CRO with all they need to succeed. Whereas we have a focus on top of the funnel. So it's like a perfect type of partnership. And we love the Gong team. We also have other agencies that we work with very well. One example I can give you, for instance, is 𝗏𝗡𝗡 works a lot with all the top AI companies in the field, and they make sure that they're well enabled on their tech stack, make sure that they organize things well, especially these days where with Claude Code and MCP servers, you can do so many cool stuff. So we make sure that we enable their team with all the things that we're learning. They're helping us the same way. And we make sure that these learnings are shared very fast because, like I was telling you before the started recording in the podcast, like 1 month these days feels like 300 years. So much is going on.
So one question I wanted to ask, going back, because we were just chatting about this before, you asked me what's going on in San Francisco. I said there are 50 events a week, and it's an amazing place. From your perspective, so there's a narrative that's floating in the city, who gets impacted, SMB, mid-market, enterprise, who gets to have a little more time to work with the customer to move from a workflow-based to an agentic sort of a structure, whether there's a hybrid. So I'd love to have your take on this, even though 3 years possibly in your terms would be 300 years. But over the next 3 years, how do you think it gets played out? Edge versus the core, SMB versus enterprise. If you plot it like a 2x2 or a 3x3, how does it get played out in each of those quadrants?
It's so fascinating because every meeting that I have these days with CEOs or with CROs or CMOs, no one describes themselves anymore as a software company. Everybody says, oh, we're doing agents for this or agents for that. And it's all about agents working together. At the same time, so that's one shift that I'm observing. Another shift that I'm observing is that I get very personal in my LinkedIn posts. So I talk about very personal things. As a result, when people approach me, they also talk to me about personal things because they feel like they've known me through the things that I'm sharing. And as a result, in the past, it used to be a lot more about, okay, I'm struggling with this at work. I really want to move to this department, but it's not really working, or I'm trying to get a promotion, or I'm trying to move to this other company, and I would help them because I'm very connected. But now the discussions are no longer about that. The discussions are, I'm vibe coding this dream that I've had for 50 years, and I can finally see it in reality. And everybody's very excited about building their own things, even within other companies, which is so interesting because you'd think that as a founder, I would get worried. What if my employees are also doing the same? Then they're not really present from their 9 to 5 to be doing that. Yet, to me, I take it as an important sign. And how I see things progressing is people are going to realize that they have a lot more freedom than they have ever had to be able to contribute with their very unique skills and very unique talents that they have. It's the first time where they can put their dreams into place. It's the first time where they can contribute very fast with their ideas. And as a result, a lot more people will operate out of joy as opposed to out of having to do something. And part of it is going to be by force, because there's going to be a lot of reduction in force in many organizations. But usually those cuts come from places where people hated their jobs anyway. Like, they were doing soul-sucking tasks anyway. They hated it. They didn't want to be there. So the fact that they're being let go, it's a good kind of push towards the type of thing that really excite them and really makes them alive. So I think it's the first time in history that we have the luxury to work on things that really make us alive, and we have the tools to solve really big problems that we really care about. And it's the first time I'm really excited about how humans learn to collaborate, to use AI to fix the things that need to be fixed. 300,000 problems that I can think about solving in US and in many other countries that I've been in. The fact that people will be focused on solving those problems instead of going to jobs that are draining them excites me.
100%. I was a judge at a high school hackathon last weekend here in Dublin High. There were 130 kids between 12 and 18 years old, 35 teams, 10 made it to the final, and we had to pick three. And sitting on the dais, what fascinated me is looking at these kids and the listening to their ideas is that every idea that they solved, you could argue cannot be solved with the tools that are out today, because they use Lovable to vibe code every one of these solutions, whether it's mental health, whether it's community relations, whether it's education assist. And so when you look through their eyes, it's absolutely that the world is, because they're not worrying about jobs, right? They're worrying about breaking into this new world with this new tool that they're AI native. So let's talk a little bit of the transformation from that perspective. It is happening. It is not something coming. It is happening at a rapid speed. So as a leader, especially with so many customers, and that are also looking at saying, hey, should I buy Chili Piper? Or this weekend I vibe code some functionalities? Or do I need to get approval from IT? Like, how, from both sides of the equation, as you engage your employee base to more ideas, better ideas, more integrated tools, the customers are now competitors. And so how do you balance that transition? What you said, no, that's a great idea, you do it, I won't do that anymore. But here are the 5 things I will do because it doesn't make sense for you. Are there specific examples you have in mind?
I am looking at all the new kids that are AI native, and I'm looking at all the entrepreneurs inside companies that are vibe coding. Our own team replaced 10 tools this quarter alone by just vibe coding things. And what I'm observing is that there's two parts to it. One is that the fact that you can do a lot is exciting, and it has them learn a lot, which is a good thing to happen. They learn what's possible, what's not possible. So the learning that is happening is awesome. In the process, they're trying to do so many things, and they're trying to put so many features in place, create so much structure that is very specific to them, that they get to a point where they get it 90% to work, 90, maybe 95%. Then they realize that it just works for the way they work. And then they realize that they move on to other things that kind of get them excited. And it becomes a lot harder to maintain, a lot harder for the companies to structure. And we have some competitors that are trying to vibe code our platform. We have some customers that have tried as well. And they get it to a certain point, and with TypeScript and with all these tools, the problem is that we have so much complexity in there. So we have to serve companies like Verizon and Meta, and they have so much traffic, so many conversations, so many calls, so many sales meetings, that if you're down for half an hour, that's hundreds of millions of dollars for just one customer that you're putting at risk. So it's not for the faint of heart to try to debug or try to really truly support like this kind of revenue volume. So they get to roadblocks on that front. At least for now, that's what AI is doing. So I'm finding that they don't manage to replicate the kind of structure that we have in place to be there for the kind of volume that it needs to be. Yet, I still find that the process in which they're vibe coding and they're learning things is very useful for everybody because they learn what is truly exciting for them. It's going to be hard, and it's going to take a while for it to stabilize until people fully understand what they're really good at and how they can really contribute to the organization or to the new dream that they're going to pursue. So I think it's going to take some time for the ecosystem to stabilize. But in the process, I think what we will end up with is people that are going to be very narrow in what they're going to pursue with their specific zone of genius, with the specific thing that they really cover well. And we're going to create an interconnected network of systems and workflows and agents that are contributing and collaborating with each other. So in my case, when I see a customer doing something cool, I think, okay, how can I bring that back into the platform and maybe give it to others? And maybe I can compensate this customer for contributing that to our platform. Maybe I can have a marketplace where all these RevOps people that are creating cool stuff, they can just deploy their workflows and their agents and get a spiff out of it. So overall, I think that we will get to that place. It's just going to take some time.
That's for sure. So what happens to pricing in between? Because going back to the sort of the older discussion, when you figured out that you underpriced and you're generating an immense amount of value and you adjust, and you have talked about this quite openly in your blogs and writing and videos. Let's talk about the future, right? The entire market collapsed last month. Not necessarily, as you read through the analyst's report, not necessarily that there will not be a SaaS revenue. It's that they just can't price it with a discounted cash flow model and give it a 10-year horizon because they don't know what is going to happen to pricing and margin and EBITDA and net income. So do you have a thought on, as you're in this, the end state may be a state, we may agree or disagree. Current state is a state who's mostly seed-based and some consumptions. What happens in the in-between state? Like, how do you step through that? How are you thinking about that?
I'm observing what you're observing, which is that it's wild, wild west, and it's really hard to create something that works for everybody and everything because we're all serving different needs and in different purposes. I actually think that there's going to be another type of destabilization around salaries as well, because I think that the way we're producing salaries right now is based on market expectations from the role. But if you take a RevOps person who has 10x impact on your operations because they've automated some processes with agents that are all of a sudden getting 10x in pipeline, that person should be compensated accordingly because otherwise the competitor is going to steal them and to get 10x also, and they will probably offer 3 times the salary, probably even more, because it's like the kind of impact that they have. So I think that salaries themselves are going to get impacted based on the kind of things that people can do with AI. And it's going to be a lot at the latitude of those that are in charge of processes to calibrate the agents at the lowest price for the lowest LLMs cost and how to orchestrate everything in a cost efficient way. There will be platforms like ours that are going to do that kind of distribution and management and routing of agents and how they talk to each other. And then we will have to have a fee on top of that because we're doing the management of things. And we're exploring a million things. We're constantly in the process of repricing because we want to make sure that the cost is low enough that it justifies not vibe coding and you can just bring us in. We also look at what impact we can have on them, because the impact that I have on Meta on their revenue is so much greater compared to how much they're paying me, and yet I want to keep that cost low, and yet I want to keep as they scale the team through our tool. We are compensating proportional to how we're helping them. So it's going to have to be a combination, like everybody else is thinking about, like base price for the platform, then agents priced at the different prices of LLM models, and then a seat model on top of it.
And what is your take on consumption? So I was in San Francisco in one of these events, and somebody said something fascinating in a completely different domain. In the US, we produce so much food to maintain pricing, and even in area of oil to maintain pricing. The world can produce a lot of oil, but to maintain pricing, supply is constrained, right? And food is exactly the same way. When it comes to token, a consumption-based pricing, which has a supply-demand equation into it, the providers of the models are driving down token costs, right? So the abundant theory, which doesn't apply in controlled markets like oil and food, the tokens are going to be abundant. So this notion of I'm going to have a credit-based pricing model, that kind of collapses right from the get-go because the tokens are going to be free. So then Does it move to the discussion that you framed earlier, that it is a percent of the outcome? You're saving 50 million and therefore it's a million, and you're saving instead of 12 RevOps person. Is it like, how do you tie it to the outcome versus consumption?
It's a difficult equation and something that I don't think it will ever be perfect, because in our case, we have certain meetings that we are booking through our platform that are worth that. For instance, SMB companies that sell to SMBs like Toast, their ACV is very low. And then I have Forrester, for instance, that has a much higher ACV. So the impact that I have on one meeting on one company is so much greater than the other one. And being able to get the percentage of that is going to be like a imperfect equation, because I'm going to get 1 cent from one company and maybe millions on another on the same kind of process that my application supports. So I think we're going to have to create together a system that solves for that. It's going to take some time. I do believe, though, that LLMs are going to, that we're going to find a way to create energy in a much more efficient way, and the LLM's cost is going to go much, much, much lower.
Do you think the value, when you look at a P&L level, 20-25% in a traditional P&L went into engineering, R&D, the below the line as that cost decreases, in your mind, does that shift towards more building your front end, these RevOps partners and solution partners, so build more go to market? Because that discussion that you just said you're having with customers, they're going 70, 80, 90% of the way, but that's not good enough, because you can't have a 10% hole in your security infrastructure. And vibe coding just creating, and somebody said, the amount of vulnerabilities people don't even understand. So do you see P&L investment is wise? Maybe the headcounts roughly stay the same, spend made it stay the same. It's just the composition moves from below the line to more marketing and sales and solutions consulting.
Thought about this topic deeply, but I am observing that overall, the obviously, like you're observing and everybody else, that the costs of building things are decreasing, and the places where there's a lot more value is around human touch and how you're creating relationships, or how you're able to hold hands for your customers to help them through change. And it's even in marketing, like right now, people that are getting paid a lot are people who are storytellers and people who are creating emotional resonance to the audience to break through the noise. So it's unclear to me how exactly the overall the costs of companies are going to get distributed, how that is going to be changed for the customer as well. I've not thought about much topic to have like a good answer to that.
So at this time, and this is my last question because I'm trying to keep an eye on time also, when you talk about transformative leadership, being open, being candid, working with your team, working with your customers, being transparent, right? Today, when you think about transparency, our visibility is fogged out beyond 18 months, 24 months. So as a leader and also as a parent of 4 kids, what does transparent leadership means to you? Because every day we can't be coming to work and say, I just don't know. So how do we define and keep the morale up, keep the focus down? What does our milestone look like? What does success look like? How do we know, right? How do you take your team through that journey? Because this phase looks like very different than the last decade or even the decade before that.
It's true that my leadership style is very unique in that I've always been very transparent with everything. Even when I don't know the answers, we have all our financials are available to our employees, including how much money we have in the bank, what our projections are, how we're doing every month. Everybody can see with the ups and downs, and we assume that everybody is an adult and can handle the truth. But yet, as you say, you can't come and say, I don't know, because that's not what is expected from people who are leading the company. So my approach has always been to hold the mission and the vision and that North Star with a lot of belief, because I do have a lot of belief in it, and realize that it's up to our own creativity and our own ability to get there. And sometimes we might not have creative solutions to things. Sometimes we might be stuck for whatever reason. But what it means to me, what shows to me, and what I'm transparent about, is just we haven't been able to be creative enough to solve for that yet. So it seems that we need to be searching for more. These are the places where I'm searching. This is how I'm thinking about the problem. But it's never about, in my case, it's never been about not knowing. It's just not having yet the creativity to solve a problem. So that's how I've been always framing it.
So maybe one last question, and this may be for my daughter. This is the Women's Month to celebrate leadership and their accomplishments. And there's been a lot written about women tend to be holistic thinkers. That's why boards that have more women leaders in them tend to take a lot more 360 view versus if it's skewed in one way, that tends to be very transactional. So when you think forward, and all the metrics are leading that way, right? Even though there's a gender pay gap, but it's edging up in certain categories. There are more women are graduating with graduate degrees, and there are more women are in CS than ever been, even though Silicon Valley is roughly still 18, 19% in tech. So if you have to think forward, do you think women are better and more competitively positioned in this age of change because the ability to think more holistically gives that gender a competitive advantage that people haven't thought about before?
I have two boys and I have two girls, and I'm also in business with my husband. And what I'm observing is that there's no better gender. What there is a beautiful symbiosis. And I tell my husband often, and my team laughs. I say that he's like symbolic to my neural. And maybe not everybody's going to get this joke, but the way I operate and the way I see things is very much like a neural network. I just observe a lot of things. And without my husband to put precision into my ideas, into my thoughts, we would not be able to operate well because he's a lot more structured and a lot more pragmatic than me. And together we make a lot better decisions because I see certain things that he doesn't see. I see, for instance, one thing that I'm extremely sensitive to and I pay a lot of attention is emotional resonance. So when I talk to a customer or I talk to a prospect, I look at a lot of their body language. Are they exciting? Are they leaning in? Are there sparkles in their eyes? Like I take a lot more of that emotional resonance into perspective when we make decisions to see where the roadmap is going. Whereas for him, it's a lot more black and white. He's listening to what they're saying on the gun call, how many people have said something, how many people have expressed something. Whereas me, I look at how many people have not said something. So I would say that it's a beautiful symbiosis, and we all use our strengths to create better futures. And overall, that's the best symbol of it, that my husband is a symbolic to my neural.
I love it. With that, we're going to wrap this up today. Alina, thank you for being here. I'd love to have a follow-up session end of the year to see some of these things that we just discussed, where you're at and how you're thinking about it. But thank you for being here. I know you're super busy. Thank you.
Thank you, Sugata, for having me. And I think we were living really exciting things, really exciting times where everything is so freaking complex. But that's why, as entrepreneurs, we love being in it.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.